I try to be a humble guy. I think the presidency is, of course, such a big job. I feel extremely confident. I mean, hell, Donald Trump is healthier than I am. So I feel extremely confident that Donald Trump is going to serve and serve well for 4 years for the American people. And I'm going to help him, and we're going to make America great again, and we're going to do it together.
That was Republican Senator J.D. Vance speaking at a rally in Reno, Nevada yesterday. Joining us now, contributor to the conservative website The Bulwark, Tim Miller. He previously served as communications director for Jeb Bush and spokesman for the Republican National Committee. He's one of our favorites around here. Tim, J.D. Vance is almost 40 years younger than Donald Trump, but that won't stop him from saying that Donald Trump is healthier, smarter, more handsome than he is. There really isn't anything they won't say to flatter the boss, will they?
Yeah, I mean, the North Korea type spin remains uncomfortable, even though we've been dealing with it for whatever 9 years now, Jonathan. And I think J.D. Vance in particular feels like he has to go overboard to overcompensate for the fact that he sounded a lot like me. He was a never Trump Republican for many years before he decided to go all in. And I think this is kind of a way for him to maintain credibility with the boss. And that has an audience of one, if you will.
Yeah, no doubt there. So let's talk about Kamala Harris. What appears to be part of her closing argument is these John Kelly revelations, and it fits into her declaration that Donald Trump is unfit for office, in terms of how he praised Hitler and the like. Do you think that's an effective argument here, and who would it work with?
Yeah, I don't know that the Hitler part itself is that effective of an argument, right? I mean, any person who thinks that Donald Trump might be Hitler curious is already voting against him, or right. Maybe there's another category of people that like that, but those people aren't really gettable either. And so, but I think that there is an element of this that's really important, and all the testing shows this, right? Which is, if you think about the types of voters that are available, it's mostly kind of my people, like Mitt Romney voting older Republicans that are trying to decide if they can get there on Kamala, that don't like Trump, the Nikki Haley voter, if you will. Or younger people who haven't really paid that close of attention to what's happening and might not know who John Kelly is still. Those are the two of the kind of final groups that haven't decided where they're landing. And I think communicating to them that the closest people around Donald Trump, that maybe if you're wavering, listen to Mike Pence, listen to John Kelly, listen to Jim Mattis. His closest advisors can't get there. They think that he's dangerous. They think he's not worth the risk. I think that more nuanced message is quite compelling. And it tests well if you look at Democratic internal polling as well.
So voters that might still be available, you just mentioned a few. There's also this, we've had a few cycles in a row now where there's been sort of a hidden vote. 16 and 20, the Trump supporters were undercounted by pollsters. They showed up bigger on Election Day, enough to give them a win in 16 and a much closer loss than expected in 20. What group do you think could be that hidden vote this time around? Are there still more Trump voters that pollsters aren't picking up? Or is it someone else, perhaps women who were upset by the Dobbs decision, who might be breaking late and quietly for Harris?
Yeah, we'll stay with the positive first, and she ended there. I do think that non-college white women post-Dobbs, we haven't seen a lot of this. You saw a little bit of this in the midterms in places like Kansas, where an abortion referendum did well in a very conservative state. I think that there are some non-college white women out there that live in very Trumpy communities, whose husbands are for Trump, whose neighbors have huge Trump signs, that aren't really talking about the fact that they plan to vote for Kamala Harris. I think that's out there. How big is it impacting polling? Who's to say? I think the worry, if you're Harris, is that this other group, kind of younger Black and Latino men, maybe aren't being responsive to polls, and you're seeing some evidence that there's some slippage there. And so I think we'll know. I was listening to Amy Walter of the Cook Report. You'll know a lot early on Election Day, based on those upper Midwest states. If she's overperforming there, it might have been those non-college white women or older Republican voters. If Trump's doing better in kind of let's say the Mountain West states, it might have been those younger Hispanic men.
So, Tim, as a final question, give us your take on the map right now. What is Harris's best path? Is it still the 3 blue wall states, or do you think it's a mix and match with some Sun Belt?
I think it's the 3 blue wall states, and then if you lose one, you're looking at either North Carolina could replace Wisconsin and Michigan, or North Carolina plus Nevada could replace Pennsylvania. And I think those 5 states are pretty much the ones that matter the most. Georgia and Arizona, I don't think are out of reach for her, but I think those are they're less important as far as reaching 270. And I think Donald Trump's in the best position in those 2 of the 7 states.
Yeah, certainly those in the Harris campaign of the 7 battleground states probably feel the worst about Arizona, but growing more confident about Nevada. So that could fit into that puzzle piece you just described. Contributor to the conservative website, The Bulwark, Tim Miller. Tim, thank you as always. We'll talk to you again real soon.